these slides? Great. Okay, got it. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the slides here. So I prepared quite a big document, but I'm only gonna, well, let's see how far we get tonight. As Michelle had mentioned, we are, I'd love to take questions as they come. Please, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat or raise your hand, and Michelle can, tell me so I can address them. So the first thing we'll discuss, this is just the agenda for the night, the outline. So part one, we'll get started. We're just getting started as treasurers. We'll go over a calendar of important dates. We'll talk about financial reports, how to generate them. That's also a big part of your role as a treasurer. Talk about the online system called Totem, which a lot of the schools are on, and some schools who are not on Totem, how they can manage theirs offline. I'll talk about deposits and payments, best practices, bank reconciliation. We'll discuss PTEZ and PayPal transactions. I do have a second. Part here. We won't get to that in this session. I realize that there's a lot of information here. I think as a treasurer, this is a big role. First of all, thank you for taking on this role. It is a really important role. So there's a lot of information here, and I don't want to rush through this tonight, but it's there, and it'll be a part two if we do another session, or I'll share the slides too. So we'll see how things go tonight, but I only plan on tackling the first part. So part one, we'll just get started. So here's the calendar, a look at what's ahead. So we're in August already, August, September. This is the time of the year where you're going to be taking the work that's already been done by the previous treasurer or perhaps yourself. So you're going to be taking the audit and the prior year's audit report, the prior year's financials, and the budget that usually the prior treasurer has at least created or started for you. And you'll be presenting those to at your first general meeting, and they need to be approved by your general membership. September 1, and October 1st. Those 2 dates are only important if your PTA has a raffle, does a raffle. These are special tax forms, government forms, California government forms for income that's generated through raffles. October 1st is also you're going to be remitting your new memberships. We'll talk about more of that later. We'll go over all of these in more detail. So if I'm rushing, don't worry, we'll talk about them in more detail. November 1st, you'll be paying the insurance premium. By November 15th, this is a big date, you'll be submitting, November 15th is the last day to get in your federal and state taxes. And it's actually not taxes, it's really more of statements of your income, and because actually we don't pay taxes, we're tax exempt. So these are just really to confirm your tax exempt status and show your finances for the year for both federal and state taxes. In November 15th, January 15th, there's some workers' compensation, a form that needs to be submitted, and a payment to be submitted. January, February is when you're going to be doing your mid-year audit. March, April is roughly when you're going to be preparing next year's budget, and then July, August is your year-end audit, and you're wrapping up for the year. I'm going to just continue. Michelle, is there any questions, or should I just continue here?
You're good.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll go over all of this in a little bit more detail. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was financial reports. These are the things that you're going to be generating You're going to be preparing them monthly for your executive board meetings, and you're going to be preparing them for your general membership meetings as well. I think the schedule at my previous school was 4 general assemblies for the year. It might be different for your schools, but roughly you'll be preparing these financial documents frequently. And typically there's a general financial statement, which I'll cover here in details, but there's other things like the treasurer's report and budgets to actuals. And it's essentially just different ways of looking at the same financial information. When you do prepare these documents and you do present them at the board meetings and the general membership, you're going to just go over the highlights of what's in them and ask people if they have any questions, answer them, and motion to ask for someone to move to approve the financials and ratify any checks that you've issued. Okay, so here's a little here's an example of a financial statement. So you'll see you'll see a listing of the accounts you have. So in this example, there's a checking account and there's a money market account. So there's actually 2 bank accounts here. And you'll see the balance forward. This is the balance from the previous year. So you have that's the money you have in the bank that you're starting the year with. And then you'll have a section for receipts, and receipts are the monies that you're taking in, and they're categorized. So for administration, you have membership dues, some totem dues, etc. Some interest income from the bank accounts, some fundraising, donations, and receipts not belonging to the association. So essentially here in this section, you'll be listing all the things you expect to receive for the year. And you'll see in this column, there's 3 columns to the right. You'll see there's a selected period. So if you're doing that, you'll want to run these financial reports for the period is usually from the period you last generated them. So like if you're doing this for every executive meeting, for instance, and you're doing it monthly, the period will be for September, for October, November, so the monthly periods. Or if you're doing it for a general assembly that's just quarterly, you'll do it for that period. And then the middle column is the year to date, and the budget column on the very far end, on the rightmost column, that's the annual budget, what you've expected for the whole year. And then this is just the financial statement continued. And you'll see now this section is for expenses. So this is the money that you're expecting to pay. So you'll have, again, in categories, administration, some administration expenses, your programs. These are typically the things that you're supporting, like for instance, in this case, there's some grants, the reflections. This is actually second district as an example of the second district, but like at school, for instance, if you're funding teachers, grants, or clubs, that's the type of expenses you'll be putting here under programs. And then fundraising typically also has expenses. So once you have, you've already had the what you've expected to receive and your expenses, and then you balance them all out. You subtract the expenses from what you expect to receive, and here is your net receipts, and then also including any carryover funds. So we have $7,000 from previously. We have 5,000. Sorry. Anyways, yeah, this is just sort of all. Yeah. Sorry. Basically, yeah. This is your net receipts minus these columns, and this is the total for the year. This is the total for the period, and this is the total for the year to date. Okay. And then this last section, depending on how you generate these financial reports, you can also have the checks that are written for this period. And those are the checks that you're going to approve. So in this example, there's 3 checks that we've written. And so when you, yeah, that's it. Does anybody have any questions regarding financial reports? There's going to be specifics in terms of whatever accounting software you use. I'm familiar with PTA Easy, which is kind of a very simplified accounting software. I know if people might use something like QuickBooks or something more sophisticated, but yeah, they will generate financial reports similar to this. Okay, so moving on.
We have a question from Belinda.
Sure. And
Hi, if we can go back
sure. One more.
a little bit. Oh, shoot. Can you hear me? There was carryover funds, capital improvement allocated, unallocated reserves. Is that where, I mean, what is that, like projects that you might have funds move over that you're not done with? Because then I was just trying to figure out why that has a, is that where you put it? Or I'm just kind of, if we could explain that more, what was that?
Oh, sure. Unallocated reserves. Sorry, this is an example that I borrowed from somebody else, so I'm just trying to figure it out myself too. So I think
Okay.
yeah, we have the balance forward.
Sheila, this is Terry Norbury. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
sure. Yes.
Unallocated reserves are the amount of, it's a budgeted amount, and it is the amount that's left over after you've estimated all your expenses in the budget, and you've estimated all of your carryover funds from the prior year and all of your income. So essentially it's the amount that you have not assigned to a budget expense line for that year. And so it's called unallocated reserves. Reserves being what you had left over last year and what you expect to get this year. It's
yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Could you expand on what that whole section is? I think kind of to the question, I don't get what the carryover. I see the unallocated reserves and I see how it ties to the budgetary, the 720 up above on the net receipts line. But what is that whole section? So less carryover funds, less capital improvement, and unallocated, and how does it total to zero?
Well, the 720 is essentially just the difference between what you have expected to get in and how much you have expected to spend. So that's the unallocated. The carryover funds are the amount that you started with at the beginning of the year from the prior years, left over from that. And the capital improvements, $5,000 are, there's a separate budget for capital improvements it doesn't appear on this form. How does it come to zero? That's a good question. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is kind of I should have gone over this myself, but this is an example from previous years, and I think it's true that I don't actually see the capital improvements where that came from here. So
basically, but what this is showing you is your operating budget, and if you have separate capital improvements, that would be under a separate budget. But most PTAs don't have that difference. Most PTAs are going to have everything in their operating budget, and this is a misleading form, but puzzling in both in the fact that it totals zero and the fact that it has a capital improvements section to it, which most PTAs don't have.
Yes, thanks for clarifying, Terry. I can send out a better example later if people would like to, but this is essentially an example taken from a previous presentation from our previous.
Sheila, there's a question in the chat that asks if this is just a simplified balance sheet.
I guess so. I'm not an accountant, so I don't technically understand what a balance sheet is, but this is like if you go into PTA Easy or if you go into, I'm also familiar with Money Minder. It is a standard form that you can generate financial statements.
This is Terry. If you're using QuickBooks or some other format, then your financial report is going to be an income statement and a balance sheet. Balance sheet being what is in your asset accounts, being your bank accounts, and what is in your, if you will, the liability side, which is essentially your net carryover funds in your account. If you use Ptez, then you're going to ask for a financial report, and it's going to be in this format. It will, for most PTAs, we'll never see anything like a capital improvement line. So that's puzzling that this example. But what's at the very top of this form are just your, if you scroll down to the top of this financial report, there's 3 columns there for the only ones that make sense is the one on the far left, the selected period. It is the balance at the end of the period of the report for your checking account and your money market account in this case. The other 2 columns, again, this is a Ptez. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me because most people don't budget for a balance sheet, and this is a asset balance, and you wouldn't. This just shows you what's in your checking account and your money market account.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much, Terry. And I'm sorry for confusing everyone with this financial statement. I can definitely come back and give you maybe a simpler statement later and go over that, but we'll move on. I think there's a lot of people who want to move on. But yeah, essentially what it's like Terry has said, and it's really just showing this is what you've budgeted, and this is what you're actually, like this is for that selected period, this is what is your transactions for that period compared to what you're budgeting for the whole year. Okay, so I'll move on. Really quickly, membership dues. There's a lot of ways to collect memberships. Totem is a really simple way. It's an online utility that over half of our school units are using. It manages payments, and so people can go online and make payments for annually resubscribe to your school's PTA, add their spouses and their children. So it's a very simple, easy to use system. The school I went to did not use Totem, so we actually managed memberships just with cash and with PayPal. And in that case, your membership person will probably be creating like this big spreadsheet of all the people who have paid, and you'll be, you essentially owe a certain amount of each membership back to us, the second district, and the CAPTA, the California PTA Association. So $4.75 of each membership. And I think that's the cost this year. It could change year over year, but I think that's the cost this year. $4.75 will be going for each membership will be going back to us, and we redistribute that back to CAPTA. So I'll give you details. Oh, I think here, if you see this will be a form that I'll be emailing to you in the next few months. It's due, I believe it was October 1st. It's in the calendar. It's either October 1st or October 15th. But essentially, this is a form, the first sort of payment that you'll be making to us. You could fill it electronically or send it to me, just an email to the treasurer at 2nd District or to Sheila Santos. And essentially, you'll be entering how many members have signed up until that point. You'll probably want to pay the insurance premium at the same time. It's $258. That was last year's amount. I'll need to verify what this year's amount is, but I don't expect it to change too much. That's it for now. You wouldn't have to be paying for workers' compensation until January. And we'll discuss those details a little bit later, but that would be the first form that you'll be sending back or payment that you'll be sending back. Does anybody have any questions regarding membership?
Just when is that due again? I know it was in the first slide.
Let
Yeah.
me see. October 1st.
Okay,
And don't worry, I'll be sending you an email.
great.
Yeah, we'll keep that. I'll be sending communications to the 2nd District, that group mailing list. Okay. And anybody who hasn't paid, I'll be sending you individual reminders. So I'm keeping track. Okay, so I think that's it. Let's move on to deposits and payments. So monthly, you'll be receiving, including like membership, if you're receiving cash or you're receiving checks for any membership or donations or any other type of sales or merchandise or things that you'll be taking in. You'll be making deposits. You'll be making deposits into your checking account and perhaps making payments, writing checks. So each month, it's basically important to keep this, have like a nice accounting routine each month. The first, and depending on when your fundraisers are, it could be, you might need to handle this weekly, but typically if you do it every couple of weeks, it's usually a good pace. So essentially you'll be making a copy of any checks that you receive, like you want to keep your receipts, essentially anything that comes in. So make a copy of the check, make a copy, if you have a cash deposit, if like, for instance, you've collected the first week of school, you've collected $100 worth of memberships, you'll want to write a receipt as well for that and have it be counted and signed by 2 people, yourself and perhaps like the auditor or the president or somebody who can help you there. And then, payment authorization forms, typically like if people are asking for expenses, like you've had like a fundraiser, if you've had like an event that your hospitality person has spent $100 on cupcakes and coffee, and you'll need to write a reimbursement check for them, you'll have like a form that they'll need to fill in their expenses, and you as the treasurer will need to sign it along with either the president and secretary, or basically 2 people need to authorize the any payments that are made, and you yourself will be writing the check and it'll be co-signed by someone. So every PTA needs to have at least 2 signatures on their checks. And as well, if you do make electronic payments, like with electronic funds transfers, like if your bank allows you to send checks through the electronically, you'll also need to have 2 authorized signers for that. And for all of these things, you're keeping physical hard copies of any receipts, plus you'll be entering them into your accounting software, like Ptez or whatever accounting software you're going to be using.
There's one question about, I just put the link for the cash verification form if people want to use that for events when they're counting cash. But there's a question, can the treasurer be one of the two people who sign the cash verification form when you have two counters?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Terry, do you know the answer to that?
You're muted, Terry.
Yes, typically the treasurer is going to be one of the people counting. And if so, they would sign the form, but typically the form is signed by the people that do the accounting or do the counting of the cash.
Thank you. There's a Nicholas has his hand raised.
Hi, thanks. Is it possible to essentially be paperless? You know, like after everything is signed, scan it and discard the paper. Is there anything at all we have to keep in paper form?
Yes, we do. There's actually regulations on Ptez website. They do require, I don't have the details off the top of my head, but I believe it's something like 7 years worth of receipts. And typically the way I've seen this is just we have a folder, one of those sort of Rolodex or those folders where you have like each month and put like a hard copy of any receipts. And so for instance, like I understand like last year was completely digital for me. And so everything was handled through emails, but I ended up just printing all my receipts and keeping them in this folder.
And okay, and how about with like all the forms that we have to sign? Do those have to stay, or can somebody like a teacher sign it and email it to us and keep that, or does it have to be a paper handout?
That's right. Yeah. So I see what you're trying to say. So yeah, like this is how we did it. So I don't know if Terry wants to jump in to give me some advice here, but the way I've done this in the past, especially last year when everything was remote, was we did it all via email. I accepted receipts that were just pictures or scanned version. I asked them to print out the form and sign it and scan it back to me or take a picture of it. Or if they had like a digital editor for the PDF to edit that was acceptable too. But I did need a record, a digital record, whether it's a digital record or a physical piece of,
Okay,
that they
good.
mailed.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you can go ahead. It doesn't look like there's other questions.
Okay, great. Oops, where did we go? So right. So, okay, so that's something, the deposits and payments, you'll be managing them as they come or every couple of weeks. What is important and why we want to keep all those records, whether it's digital or physical. Also, you can keep a lot of your digital records, for instance, like on a Google Drive or in a Dropbox as well. But once a month, you'll need to do bank reconciliations, and that is basically checking all the checking your bank statement. So you would get typically most of the bank statements are electronic nowadays. Anyways, you would download the PDF for the bank statement or receive it in the mail, and you would be comparing your bank statements to the checks that you've written and payments that you've received through the month. So that's essentially where you'll need to have all these records to be able to do your bank reconciliations. You as a treasurer will do the bank reconciliation, but you'll need to have it reviewed and signed off by somebody who is not a check signer, typically the auditor or some other person on the board. They could be an appointed person on the board as well. They just can't be a person who was actually a check signer. And you'll keep those reconciliations every month. Either it's an electronic or physical piece of paper that you'll be putting in your records. Does anybody have any questions there? Okay, I'll move on. PTA Easy or PT Easy. So PT Easy is free for all units. the first thing we do every year is like put all the officers into PTEZ, and you as treasurer actually have a big role there too. If you get assigned the role as treasurer, you have more functionality than what other roles would be having. So essentially, if you do decide, you don't have to, but the free version of PTEZ is lets you, I believe, lets you create a budget, and it allows you to upload documents. And you actually do want to upload your documents, like your tax documents. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But you can also use it for accounting, and lots of units do use it for accounting. So if the fees, the annual fees, are based on how much revenue you'll be taking in. So if you're taking in, $25,000 or less, it's $99 a year. 25,000 to 50,000, it's $139 a year. 50 to 200,000, it's $179, and over 200,000, it's just $219. Yeah, so what you will, I actually discussed this already, but essentially just we need to update the board members, update the annual financials. So for instance, like if you have the financials from last year from your previous treasurer, you'll actually want to take those financial statements and upload them onto PTAZ. You'll also want to upload the budget that is approved into PTZ, and other things like audits and your tax forms when you've completed them.
So I have a question. So it sounds like if we're not using it for accounting purposes, we're still required to use it to upload those other portions on the bottom. It's a requirement. Is that correct?
I believe so. I mean, I know as Terry might be able to step in here, but I do know as the district treasurer, I have like a view of all of the units. So for instance, if I want to know where your, if you filed your tax, your like 990 tax form, you can either email it to me directly and I will upload it for you, or you can upload it there and I can see it. If that makes
The short answer to that is yes. You're required to upload those documents, and the point of that whole group of documents that you put in there is that it is a permanent file that is accessible by your successor. It's surprising, perhaps, to some of you who haven't been around for a while, but how often the records don't find their way to the next board or to the next treasurer. So having these records on permanent file, these are the important ones that need to be there. So it is a requirement that you put them all up there every year.
I see in the chat too a question about uploading. It's just uploading the physical document, like a PDF. Sorry, like you're not re-entering anything, you're just uploading a PDF or a file. And it is useful. You can actually go back over the years and see the previous budgets, previous taxes. So for instance, if you're having to do the taxes this year and you don't, you haven't been able to contact the previous treasurer, you can look at those documents, and it's helpful. It's very helpful. I did find too, like at middle school, in middle school, when you're only there for 3 years, that kind of institutional knowledge gets lost, but having this record of documents is really useful.
Sheila, there's a question here in the chat asking if there is PTA or PTA, sorry, folks, it used to be called PTA-EZ and now it's PTEZ. That's why you hear some fumbling a little bit. There's a question about whether or not there is training that exists for PTEZ online that people can just go watch. Does that exist?
It does. Unfortunately, they revamped their UI, and their UI is really great. And as of last year, when I was figuring out a lot of things, the videos were all from the previous UI, so it was a little bit confusing, but they do have a lot of YouTube videos and documentation online. If there is if there is if there's enough people interested, we could have a PT Easy training that is helpful. It is a pretty intuitive piece of software too, if you're good with well, yeah, I'm not an accountant, for instance, and I was able to figure it out, but it is definitely useful to have a training. So there is some documentation. It's a little bit helpful.
Sheila, it is worth knowing that their customer support is very good.
Oh, yeah.
You call them up, they are on top of it and will answer it and help you out there. So don't hesitate to call the help desk.
I'm showing you a screenshot right here, and this is like one page where this is going into the document management section. I might actually, would it be useful for me to just pop up PT Easy right now to just give you a quick view? I'm gonna just, I think I'm logged in already. Just as a quick example. Okay, so I'll bring this to my screen. Just really quickly here. This is the view when you first log in, and you'll see this is the home view. You'll see checks. So this account does have the financials enabled. So I have the ability to write a new check, and this is what it would look like. You select, you know, it has my bank account here. I can select the bank account. I choose the date, the amount, and essentially, you know, save this. I can look at previous checks that I've written. Similarly with receipts, I'll write in a new receipt. If I received a check or some money, some cash, I could write the receipts here. This is the ledger, shows you things like the category list is like the list of things in your budget. The reports I talked about earlier, this is where you're generating those financial reports. So you'll see this is the financial statement that I had just showed you earlier. Again, it was an example, so perhaps it was a little bit of a cut and paste from some of these. Obviously, we didn't want to like show, you know, reveal real actual. So I don't want to go into details right here, but just essentially just to show you that here you can generate financial reports, financial secretary reports, the treasurer's report. Treasurer's report is interesting because it's essentially just all the checks and that you've written and deposits that have come into a certain bank account. Here you can see the tools. The tools help you create your budget for next year. There's an administration account or drop down, and that's where, for instance, you can update the officers, the board officers, upload documents. So there's like documents that I can upload. So this year, these are the various documents: mid-year audit, the 199 form. You don't necessarily have to upload all of these. I'll send you actually the information for like the ones that you do need to upload each year. Yeah, that's, does anybody have any questions? Here's, for instance, the officers who are here. So we'll be actually putting, this is a second district PTA. So, you know, all of us, some of us are here on the call. We'll have like the communications person, some advisors who are here, the president, who's Melissa, vice president is Yvette, myself as a treasurer. So yeah, this is the view that you have in PTEZ. Does anybody have any questions? How did those documents show up in PTEZ in order to upload? Oh, okay, so the documents, I'm not quite sure. They're already there. They've been, that's a good question. I'm not sure if this is something that we manage and edit, but essentially it shows up, you'll see each year. So this is the 20, actually this is next year's, this is 22, 23, this is the 21, 22, you know, 20, 21. So you can go back into previous years. For the actual Sincere, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Sheila, the answer to that is that you have one of these documents, or any of these documents would be a PDF on your hard drive in your computer. And then when you get ready to upload it, you would upload that file off your hard drive. So it doesn't come up straight out of PTA-EZ.
No.
It's a setup so that any unit could use it, including those that don't use PTEZ as their accounting package. So you upload PDFs off your hard drive.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So if you use Google Sheets or Microsoft products, typically the best thing is just export it as a PDF. Yeah. All right. Okay, so I think that's it. That's all I'm going to cover for PTEZ right now. If we can definitely have a more in-depth training later. I think the last thing I just want to cover quickly is PayPal. I don't know if people, I mean, how many units are using PayPal, but my previous unit used it really heavily, especially during COVID. So ideally, it should be treated as a separate account, like a bank account. I have to say, my unit did not treat it as a separate account, but you do want to like make sure the accounting is accounted for. For instance, each of the transactions that happen in PayPal do need to be recorded. At the very minimum, you would need to record each of the transaction and sort it into what is membership, what is fundraising, what is donations, and what is like, let's say if you're selling something else like t-shirts or something like that. So you'll want to make sure that either it's treated like a separate bank account, and then in PTEZ you would have like your checking account, your PayPal account, and you'd be listing each transaction in PTEZ either as a receipt or a check. Or what I had done as in previous units, and again, this is probably, I mean, it's okay, but it's better to treat it as a separate bank account. But at the very least, you will need to just separate how much, as you transfer, when you transfer your PayPal into your bank account, if you manage it that way, you will need to make sure you know how much of those funds are donations versus membership versus any other income in. Okay, and then yes, this is essentially each, the PayPal account should also be audited similar to the checking account. So every 6 months we do the audit. You should be either starting or finished your audit for the year ending June 30th. And you'll be doing an audit again in January, February timeframe. So we do it every 6 months. And so if you'll do that for your checking account, you'll do that for your PayPal account. Does anybody have any PayPal questions?
I have a question. What if you don't have a PayPal, you don't have balance in your PayPal, it's simply used as a way to make payment? So for example, for the PayPal, my personal account, it just connected to my bank account. I just use PayPal as a way to pay people.
Okay. But this is more for if you have a PayPal account specifically for your PTA. Do you have one for your PTA?
I don't know. I'm an incoming treasurer.
Oh,
It's
okay,
just a
got it.
hypothetical question, I guess.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure, you shouldn't be using your personal PayPal account for the.
No, I don't mean personal.
So yeah, you're right in a sense that, so for instance, the account that I managed, it was a business checking, it was a business PayPal account that they do have some special, fees for nonprofit businesses, nonprofit organizations. So you would get this special PayPal account. And if you already have one, you'll need to figure out from your previous treasurer how to access that account. You can log in, and that account is typically connected to the bank account. So for instance, in the school I was previously in, we had a PayPal account. Our Wells Fargo bank account, checking account was connected to the PayPal account. And like you just described, you can make payments and it would just go directly from your bank account and make that payment. And when you receive money, receiving money is a little different. You receive money from PayPal, it stays in your PayPal account until you transfer it into your bank account. And that's what I was talking about. Like when you do make that transfer, you have to be careful with your accounting at that point. You either account for every single transaction in your PayPal account that has happened. So let's say you had 30 membership payments and $400 for donations, and you've transferred a bunch of things at the same time. You would either want to you would either submit all those transactions individually into Ptez, or you would make a lump accounting statement for this is $400 worth of donations, and this was 30 memberships. Does that make sense? Or
somewhat. Luckily, I have a co-treasurer who knows more. I'm going to go back and check with her.
When you do log it, PayPal is actually very there's a lot of utilities there. Oh, sorry, I'm realizing I'm out of time soon, but I will say just quickly with PayPal, it's a very extensive. There's a lot of utilities you can use there. They do generate spreadsheets of all the transactions. You can download all the transactions. There's a lot of things you can create buttons for your website to automatically click on a button and it'll pay your PayPal account. So it is worthwhile going through PayPal and going through some of the tutorials and understanding what's there. But from an accounting perspective, you will need to make sure you download all your transactions in PayPal and account for them individually in your accounting software like Ptez. All right, so I think there's only 5 minutes left, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat, Sheila from Lori, that asks, how does that work for paying for online accounts like a website, since there isn't a cosigner? So if we're required to have 2 signatures on a check, and how do you pay for things with an online account? I think that's what Lori's asking, but Lori, clarify if that's not right.
Lori, is that right? Okay. So what, again, I'll tell you how I have done this as a treasurer myself. I would, there would be the, let's say there was a bill that came in. Is this, so this is, sorry.
All right, I was trying not to speak out loud. But in the case where we have to avoid not paying for something that renews every year, if we were going to have for a website domain, if we were going to set it up with a PayPal account so it doesn't get missed in all our end of the year transactions and everything, there won't be an expense request form because it's automatically renewed every year. And nobody's signing it, but it's accounted for in our budget.
Right. So with PayPal, it's in particular, because with PayPal, oh, actually, that's a good, I'm not 100% sure.
Sheila, let me answer this. Any time you make a payment on using a computer, whether it's through PayPal or out of a bill pay account or anything else that you've arranged, there is a form that has to be signed by the treasurer and another officer. And that takes the place of a check that is required for 2 signatures. So that form with signatures needs to be filled out and kept with the payment or the invoice or whatever it is that you're paying to to prove that you've had 2 signatures. And in the example that was given, where there's some sort of automatic payment, then it'd be up to the treasurer to be sure to generate that form and to generate the accounting that goes behind the payment that has been triggered. But that's the answer.
So it's still an internal monitoring process. We still have to know, even though it's going to be automatically paid, we still have to know when
That's
it's
right.
expected to be paid.
Right, and that you would know it even if you forgot it, because you're going to reconcile that account, the money in that account at the end of the month, and some amount will have gone out, and you'll say, oh my goodness, that's the website account, and we need to do the forms.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sure.
There just needs to be a paper trail and 2 signers, right? So, yeah, you're good.
And then I'm just gonna quickly, we will need to schedule another training session for more of this, but I can scroll through really quickly just to see what's next or what's available. In part 2, we'll be looking at the rest of the year, and we'll cover more things like audits, your tax forms. This is also other tax exempt forms, workers' compensation, how to prepare a budget. We'll talk a little bit more about PayPal and Totem as donor platforms. And I added a whole bunch of links here. I would say our own organization's website, sfpta.org, is really valuable for a lot of the basics, a lot of what I've discussed here. There's a finance section under our in our website. CAPTA also is an amazing resource. Under in CAPTA, I'll show it really quickly. Do I have it up here? I think I have CAPTA up here. Oops. Right, so this is the CAPTA website. If we look at PTA leaders, run your PTA and toolkit. This is really fantastic. There's toolkits for if you're a president, for finance, if you're a finance officer or treasurer. There's just all the information that I've just talked about. A lot of it is coming directly from the CAPTA website or our own website. And then there's just other links here too as well. Linking to the IRS and as well in the California Attorney General's website for various forms that you'll need to fill out. That's it. I don't want to go into those details tonight. I just wanted to give you a little preview, and we'll share this document too. All right, so it's 8:31. Melissa, do you have anything to wrap up or any other last minute questions?
Sheila, give them your email account so they can contact you.
Oh, yes. Okay, so first of all, is everybody on this list? Are you getting the group emails, the treasurer group? Okay, so if you're not, then that's important to know. Where's the best way to, I can put it in this document, but if you can write it down right now, it is, I'll write it in the chat. How about that? So you can reach me at sheila.santos.pta@gmail.com. I can also be reached, oops, I just sent that to Michelle. That's my email. And then I believe it's also the SFPTA treasurer.
Just treasurer@sfpta.org is another way to reach Sheila.
Yeah, so let me put that in here. Treasurer at sfpta.org. These emails. And send me an email if you are not receiving the group. If you're not receiving the group emails, I'll add you to this.
There, if you all don't know, we have a bunch of Google groups for different officer positions. for your PTAs. For instance, there's a president email Google group, and there's a treasurer or financial officer Google group. There's one for communications officers. There's one for arts education folks. So we have several different groups so that officers from different schools can speak with each other and get support on different topics. And so we have one specifically for financial officers. Sheila, I was also just thinking, I wanted to just maybe throw out there, this may be a no-brainer for people, just they would assume this, but the entire PTA board at your school has a fiduciary responsibility, and that why we have all of these like 2 signatures and all these procedures, on cash verification forms and making sure you do everything right is not just to be a pain in the neck, like with all of these rules you have to follow, but you are each 501c3s, you have a legal responsibility as a 501c3 organization, but also as a PTA, it's really, really important that you're protecting the assets of your organization. And those are not just the money, which is really a big deal, right? That people at your school and community members donate to support the students at your school and the programs that your PTA is running. So it's that money, but it's also the volunteers and the PTA's reputation. And so the trust that the community has in you as a PTA is associated with how responsibly you manage the funds that they give to you to support the PTA's work at the school. And so following all these, why sometimes they might feel a little burdensome, they're really important to manage those funds well, make sure they're being spent in alignment with the goals of the PTA to support students, and holding those assets and all of that cash responsibly, so that the organization can continue on past your tenure as an officer with PTA. So I just wanted to throw that in as like a why it matters.
I wanted to add a little bit in there too. Thank you for bringing that up, Michelle. And just say that I'm Melissa, the new district president. And I just wanted to thank Sheila so much for jumping right in there. She's brand new to the district board and jumping right in and hosting this treasurers and financials training for you, and to encourage everyone to encourage your boards and the other members, just as Michelle said, these financial responsibilities are important for every board member. So encourage them to come on Saturday, September 18th in the morning to our officer training at that time as well. And we'll be covering some more of this. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Sheila for jumping in as a brand new treasurer to conduct this.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Michelle.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.